Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here for this episode number 5 of the Inner Resolution podcast, where we explore the inner resolution philosophy based on two main sources, let's say, of inspiration. So the inner resolution philosophy is based, the best way I can illustrate it is with a hot air balloon. So when we drive or when we manage a hot air balloon, we need two forces. We need two elements or two ways that we can control it, that we can manage it for it to rise and to fall. Not falling too much, I hope, but at least to go up and down. It's through pushing hot air in the balloon while also managing the weights that are holding down the basket. And it's in a balanced way. It's when we find the balance between pushing hot air in the balloon and releasing some of the weights that we can have a better rise and a better management or better control in managing the hot air balloon. So the inner resolution philosophy, it's the same way. For us to rise, for us to feel fully alive, for us to deepen our inner peace, there's two ways, two paths that we can explore. And it's when we find the balance in those two approaches, that's where we find the sweet spot and where we feel more alive. We really fully live our own lives and we deepen our inner peace. So one of the path is, you probably already noticed if it's not your first episode, but if it is your first episode, then let me pull out a graphic that illustrates what I'm talking about. So you'll see here the inner resolution philosophy, two paths, one destination is deeper inner peace. It's a better, a more fulfilling life. So we feel more alive and we can engage more in life the more we explore those two paths. So as the hot air balloon, one path is creating lift and the other path is releasing the weights that we are carrying. So to create that lift, we need to focus, we need to nourish, we need to support those elements, the 7 elements that you see on the left of your screen. We need to support those elements, to align them, to make them more aligned with who we are, with where we want to go, with how we want to feel. And we're always focusing, or not focusing, we're always leaning into an internal state. So we need to align ourselves, align those 7 elements into or towards certain internal states, which will make us, which will generate the lift that we need to feel more alive and to deepen our inner peace. At the same time, so the first path, the sadhana approach, is the equivalent of self-care. So when we do all the right things, in quotes, air quotes, and we don't get the results that we want, usually most of the time it's because on the other path we need something, we need to explore some of those elements too, because that other path is there to release the weights so we can lift, we can rise. As a hot air balloon, we can push all the hot air in the balloon that we want. If we don't release some of the weights, we're not going to go very far. So if you're feeling like you're doing all the right things and there's no momentum, there's no transformation, there's nothing seems to be happening, then you have the opportunity to look at the other path where you can address some of the internal conflicts that you have and release some of the weights that you're carrying. So you'll see that it's, again, 7 dimensions, 7 levels that you can explore and release some of the weights that is located in one or many various levels on that side. And it's the combination of the two that creates the rise, that becomes magical. So you can align all you want. If you don't release the weights, you're not going to go very far. And if you focus only on releasing the weights, so going to therapy, doing various exercises to release, to forgive, to let go, but you don't align, you don't focus on self-care as much as the releasing the weight side, then again, you're not going to go very far. So you can be doing all the right things and you can be addressing all the right issues, but if you don't do both at the same time, then your progress will be limited. And there's one thing that I want to be, let me take this off the screen. There's one thing that I want to be clear is that it doesn't have to be fully or perfect on each side, on both sides, for you to start moving forward. Every time that you take a step, that you explore one of the element on each side, you are making progress. It's when you combine the two elements, the two paths, at the same time. So a little bit of self-care, a little bit of releasing, that's where the magic happens. So it's really about, it doesn't have to be perfect. It can't be perfect in my opinion. The idea is to explore a little bit on each side and to find the balance. So not too much self-care while ignoring your conflicts, and not too much focus on the conflicts, on your internal conflicts, while neglecting self-care. It's really a balance between the two. So that's, in a nutshell, that's the inner resolution philosophy. And what we do once a month, we explore one dimension of those two paths. So 7 dimensions. On one side, you have the 7 elements of the sadhana approach, and on the other side, releasing the weights, you have the 7 levels of the 7 levels framework, which is concentrated on conflict resolution, the internal conflicts that we address, that we resolve, and we release the weights on that side. So we take one dimension per week, and this week is the dimension of identity. So how do we focus on identity related self-care elements, and at the same time, well, not at the same time, but equally, we give enough attention to the side that we might have some identity-based conflicts, internal conflicts, that we can address to release what we're carrying, and then the self-care becomes even more, I wouldn't say relevant, but even more efficient, because we're releasing the weights at the same dimension, within the same dimension. I hope that makes sense. If you want to dive deeper into the inner resolution philosophy and where it comes from and how it works and how you can apply to your own path, then I invite you to watch episode 1 and 2 of the Inner Resolution podcast. Episode 1 was a kind of an overview of the philosophy and how it works in our lives. And episode number 2, we deep dove, something like that. We went really deep into the 7 dimensions to set up the next 7 podcast episodes, where we go from episode 3, it was the physical level. Episode 4 was the element, the emotion level. And now we're at episode 5 with the identity dimension. Now, the idea, like I shared, both paths, each dimension leans into an internal state. So to know if your self-care or your therapy or your releasing, either your alignment or your releasing is working, is when you work in the identity dimension, the the internal state that you're gonna lean into when you work in that dimension is dignity. So through your self-care and through your releasing, the more you touch to your dignity, the more you heal your dignity on one side, and the more you address your conflicting identities, or that releases or that gives you back that feeling of dignity, you know you're on the right path. You know you're doing it, you're doing the work, and you're moving forward. So what is the dignity element, internal state? We'll get to that into a little bit, but to give you a rough idea, like in a big nutshell, it's really about self-worth. So when we take care of ourselves, the more we take care of ourselves, the more we align our elements with who we are, the more we're going to feel dignified, and the more we're going to feel worthy. So our self-worth, the worth that we give ourselves, is going to feel elevated. It's going to grow. Same thing with the releasing side. When we're carrying conflicts, when we're carrying trauma and hurt from our past, from our experiences, and we started identifying to those conflicts, to those hurt, then our self-worth is gonna be diminished. It's gonna feel we're going to feel less worthy because we had those experiences, because we're carrying those conflicts, those weights. So as soon as we release those weights, then we start to gain back that self-worth, that worthiness, that dignity that we jeopardized by carrying those weights. So it's really the balance between the two. In the identity dimension, we're leaning into dignity. The idea is to get more dignity, to not to it's not about creating more dignity. It's to reconnect, to rediscover the dignity that is innate in us through alignment, so through self-care, and through releasing, so through resolution. And once we bring those two together, a little bit of self-care, a little bit of releasing, and we move forward with that, you'll see that your dignity and self-worth will come back in droves, which will help you to do a little more self-care, a little more alignment, a little more releasing, and that's how we progress on our path with the inner resolution philosophy. All right, let's get into more of the material part of the podcast episode. If you've been if you've watched one episode before this one, then you know that we're always working with 5 questions in our podcast. In each episode, we have 5 questions that we explore. So the first question, we go a little bit deeper into the dimension to better understand it. The second question is always about that internal state that we lean into. Then third question is about, if I'm not mistaken today, the third question is about alignment. How do we do that? Or no, actually it's on the conflict side. So the third question is about releasing. How do we do that? And what does it feel like? Fourth question about the alignment. And the fifth question, it's always a question that I leave with you so you can carry that question. You can think about it until the time we meet again. And whatever comes up when I ask those questions, whatever comes up is for you to nurture, to listen to. And you'll see that sometimes the answers that you're getting, the messages, they can be uncomfortable. I invite you to sit with those and just see what comes out of it. This episode is not about fixing everything. It's not the coaching episode. Like, you're not gonna, make major progress towards your goals or whatever. It's really the whole Inner Resolution podcast. It's about reflecting. It's about showing up asking different questions and reflecting on what could it mean for you at this precise moment. On that note, feel free to share your comments in the comments, the questions in the comment section. Please remember that it is obviously a public platform, so whatever you put in the comments, everybody can see. So no, well, it depends on you. If you're comfortable with anything, that's fine. And if you want people to respect your privacy, then obviously you can send me a quick email, a personal email that will be your confidentiality, your messages will be confidential and respected. And if you put something in the comment, I answer all comments that you're putting in. So feel free to do so. All right. Let's jump into the first question of this episode. It's an interesting one because the dimension we're exploring tonight, the dimension of identity. So tonight, July 29th, it's a full moon in Aquarius. It's the day of miracles, and it's also the very start of a different planetary alignment for my astrological sign. Well, for all the signs, but the meaning for my sign is that it's now time for me to focus less on the identity that I create for others. So to focus less on being evaluated from the outside perspective. So titles, money, numbers, accomplishments, and more focusing on the inside. And I've been in that situation where that switch from the outside, being focused on how others are seeing me, to how I see myself, and to explore those two paths. So taking better care of myself and releasing some of the weights that I've been carrying in the past, linked to my identity. I've been there not so long ago, but a few years ago. But it was a pivotal moment in my life when I was really focused on how people saw me. So to putting up a front, to putting on a mask, to making sure that my identity, my reputation was super clean, even though through my 20s I kind of complicated life for myself. So I was so focused on how others would see me, that when I understood that the real growth and the real self-worth and the real dignity came from what I was living inside, and when I made the switch, it changed everything, like literally for me. So now it's still that kind of energy, that kind of transit is coming back, and I find it quite interesting. I'll see how it develops and what what the future holds for me. But the idea is really about the when no one is watching. So, like the question that I just posted, when no one is watching, who are you? So when no one is watching, when there is no role to play, so it's not about uh, making sure that your reputation or how people see you is exactly how it's supposed to be. It's not about, no one to impress. So it's not about showing up in a certain way that other people will be impressed, or will want to be with you just because you show up a certain way. It's not about a performance to put on a show. It's not about putting on a mask. It's not about showing up how other people want you to show up. It's about showing up. It's about being, not doing something for others. It's about being who you are, 100% in authenticity and honesty. So when no one is watching, who are you? That's a good question that I like to ask myself, and also others, I guide them on their path, it's that who shows up when there's nothing to gain from the situation, because that's how we play the game of life most of the time, is that we're going to show up in situations either expecting something in return, or there's going to be some type of unshared or unspoken exchange. So I show up a certain way and I expect you to show up a certain way, or how we're set up for work. So I show up to work, I work a certain number of hours, I expect to be compensated for those hours, those contributions. And so there's a bunch of exchanges like this that we expect and that we create by showing up not fully as ourselves. Because if I had to, not if I had to, but if I ask you the question, and again, the answer is solely for you. If I asked you the question, if you had to, show up at your place of work where you are paid to contribute something specific, if you had to show up as yourself, as your true self, two questions: would you still show up? Would you still work there? And two, would you be compensated the same way that you are compensated right now? So, meaning that we put on a role, we put on a performance that fits with the compensation that we're receiving for the work, the contribution that we're giving. So if we take out the contribution side, would you still show up to do the work if you weren't going to get paid for it? And if the answer is no, that's fine. It's not like a do or die situation. But if the answer is no for you, it means that when you show up to do that work, you're not yourself fully. You're putting on a role, you're putting on a performance to be compensated. And then once the clock, the 9 to 5, let's say, so you punch in at 9, you punch out at 5. And then at 5:01, you become your true self. You become somebody else that you had to be to get compensated in that specific situation. So if you had to show up fully as yourself, would you still do that work? I know that for me, it's many times in my life, I asked myself that question. And the answer was like, not sure. Not sure that I would do the same thing. So the idea is to when we explore the dimension of identity, to regain our dignity, to explore those two paths in self-care, in alignment, and in releasing, in dealing, addressing and dealing with the weights and the conflicts. Then those are the elements that we explore to answer the question that I asked you. Like, if I was, if I don't show up as myself to work, to be compensated in some way, if I play a role, a performance, then I'm not fully aligned, because I'm not myself 100%. So I'm not fully aligned with my identity. And therefore, I leave a little bit of my dignity at the door to be able to perform and to be compensated. And at the same time, there's a little bit of conflict within me to do that, because if I was not compensated, or if I had to show up as myself fully, I may not be doing that work. So there's a conflict in me that chips away a little bit at my dignity every time I show up to get that compensation. And at the same time, there's a certain lack in my alignment, because I choose to not be aligned by doing the work. I hope that makes sense. So for me, it happened many times in my life where I came to a point saying, like, it's costing me too much of my dignity, of my self-worth, to show up for that specific level of compensation at that specific work. So I had to leave. I had to go. And I'm not saying that this is the solution for you. What I'm saying is that when we notice that our dignity, our self-worth is not full, it's not complete, it's not 100% in certain situations, it's because we're playing a role, we're performing to get something in return. So if we flip that around, if we take really good care of our identity, if we feel really aligned with who we are and who we're and what we're contributing, like the identity that we shape for ourselves, and at the same time we do the work to release the weights we're carrying that are slowing us down. If we explore both paths, then we will be really aligned with our identity. We're going to be feeling more alive. We're going to be at peace with who we show up, because there will be, well, less conflicts or no conflicts, and there's going to be a really strong alignment with who we really are. So we're going to be at peace, and we're not going to expect anything from others. Because we show up fully, we don't have a lack, we don't have conflicts, so we don't expect anything from others. We're there to interact, we're there to contribute, we're there at peace and to share the love, but we're not expecting anything. So therefore, if we're not expecting anything, we're not gonna be disappointed, and we're not going to suffer at the in the interactions. So that's like the full circle of the dignity, the identity dimension in the exploration of today. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, because that's actually the answer for the next question, the exploration for the next question. But this one, when no one is watching, who are you? Who are you when no one is watching? So that's the first question to start the exploration. Who shows up when there is no role to play, there is no one to impress, and there is no performance required? Who shows up? Which version of yourself shows up in those moments? All right, let's jump to the second question. And then we already covered this one. What does dignity actually mean as an inner state? And what does it feel like when it is genuinely present? So as I was sharing, when you're truly feeling dignified and your self-worth is at its maximum, then you walk into a room full of people and you're not expecting anything from anybody else. It doesn't mean like complete independence and you don't actually need anybody else. My the well, maybe not the objective, but the purpose of developing your dignity is to not be dependent on others. Codependency, sometimes it can work in some situations, but whenever you become dependent of somebody else, is that a little bit of your identity, a little bit of your dignity, of your self-worth is linked to that dependence, to that dependency. So if the other person leaves or doesn't fulfill their part of the bargain, then your self-worth will take a shot. You may have experienced that in the past. I know I did, when I became dependent in some relationships and then the other person left, or I left the relationship, or then I felt as part of my self-worth was linked with that relationship. So losing the other person made me feel like I was losing a part of myself. So it took a lot of self-care, a lot of alignment, and a lot of releasing to figure out that there was no loss in dignity. It was only hidden or kind of pushed aside by all the weights that I was carrying and the misalignment with who I was, that I kept recreating. So what does dignity actually means, and how what does it feel when you truly feel it and it's truly present. That's what it feels like. You can engage with life, but engage with people without needing or expecting anything from them. So it's really about full self-worth, meeting full self-worth. Then it's the engagement based on purpose and on desire, not on need, that will create those relationships. And those types of relationships, when you show up as yourself, fully yourself, in a relationship that respects that and that wants that, that's one of the best, from my perspective, that's one of the best feeling in the world. So I wish you to connect with those people and find those relationships, to really be able to fully be aligned, to fully be yourself, and to have the opportunity and the space to release some of those weights, to address some of those internal conflicts, so you can really feel the inner peace of fully being yourself with your full dignity and topped off self-worth as much as you want. So I wish that for you, if that is something that you want on your path. So let's jump to the other question. So we did, who shows up when nobody is watching, or when there's no performance to be offered. Who shows up in those moments for you? And then what does it feel like when that person, that version of you that shows up, is fully aligned with yourself, with you? Then it's the full dignity, the full self-worth that shows up. And that's where you have the opportunity to build relationships based on being yourself, on your true self, not on the mask, not on the performance, not on a prerequisite that you have to be a certain way to fit with certain people. Because when we create relationships that way, then it can become exhausting to always play that role or always perform at a certain level to stay connected to certain people. Because if you don't show up at that level, if you don't play that role, those relationships will not last very long. It happened to me in my 20s. At one point, I realized that I was showing up for friends, in air quotes. I was showing up for friends that I thought they were expecting me to show up a certain way. And when I realized that, then I stopped showing that way, because I didn't feel dignified. I didn't feel worthy it didn't feel good to show up that way. When I stopped performing, then those friends, in air quotes, they all left. They did not support the true self that I was showing up as, and that I was offering. They did not want that version. So these people left my life, which was a good thing. At that time, it hurt quite a bit, but it was a good thing in the end. So the flip side of that, what happens when, or how does it feel when you feel genuinely dignified and self worthy in those situations, in those relationships that are allowing you to be your true self? That's the top standard of relationships. So I wish you that you connect with somebody in that way. So let's jump into question number 3. That's question number 3. Yes. Question number 3. What identity conflicts are you carrying? So the beliefs that about who you are that are quietly holding you back. So now that you answered the question, who shows up in moments where there's no performance, no roles or anything, what version of yourself shows up? Then we looked at how does it feel when the best version, the highest version of yourself shows up in those moments. How does it feel? The inner peace, the deepening of the inner peace, the presence, the alignment, the connection, the authentic connection that happens with people, and the opportunity to be your true self in presence of others. That's the golden standards of relationships. So how do we attain that? How do we lean one step at a time? How do we lean in that inner state of dignity by aligning, by releasing, to slowly get to that point where we truly feel ourselves, and that when we show up, when we show up that way, we actually feel more inner peace by showing up without a performance, without a mask, without a role, without expectations, truly as ourselves. The inner peace that we feel is much deeper. So how do we get to that point? So we have the two paths: the releasing, the alignment path, and the releasing path. And this question is about the releasing path. So what identity conflicts are you carrying that are holding you back? So the beliefs about who you are, or who you have to be, or who you should be to connect, to fit in, to be accepted, anything that you feel that you need to play or you need to perform to feel connected with people, that those are probably, but possibly conflicts, identity conflicts that you've been carrying for quite a while. So as I shared, the going into work, when you need to operate in a certain position, maybe you're not 100% yourself for that position. Maybe you have a certain level of conflict, and the the constraints that are limiting you on the identity level, like you want to show up a certain way, but you have constraints that are preventing you from showing up fully. Those are the conflicts, the identity conflicts that we can address to slowly release them. And then as the more we release those conflicts, the more we show up fully as ourselves. The more we free ourselves up, like the hot air balloon. To rise, we need to release some weights, because otherwise we're not going anywhere. So the more weights we release, the more we give ourselves the opportunity to rise. So that's what the question is referring to. What identity conflicts are you carrying? What weights do you need to release, so those beliefs, those identity conflicts will not hold you back anymore? So that's the releasing part. On the releasing side, we're releasing weights, we're addressing conflicts, we're resolving, so we have more space to operate, to choose from a more aligned perspective. But it's not, doing just that by itself is not enough. We need, as soon as we do a few steps on the releasing side, we benefit greatly by also doing a few steps on the alignment side, which is the next question that I will put on the screen right now. So that releasing side is about aligning, that alignment side, I mean, it's about aligning ourselves with the true identity that we have. So in moments of self-care, when we tend to who we actually are, that we support that identity, that we create it, that we release it. We can release the conflicts that we have, but we can also take care of that identity in a way that it feels more comfortable to show up fully and to show up as our true self. So it's not just about releasing the conflicts and dealing with the issues. It's also, well, the issues that are holding us back. It's also about stimulating, nourishing the elements that enable us to fully show up as our true self. So the question for this: what would it mean to give your identity element more love, more attention, more focus, to tend to who you actually are rather than who you think you should be. So if I take the work example again, you might have a conflict that there are some restrictions that comes with the role that you play in a certain company, that you have conflicts that you have to play within those barriers. And sometimes what usually happens is that we're going to put those barriers, those limiting beliefs and those barriers really tightly, in a way that there's not even space to show up a little bit as who we want. I'll give you an example, more of a lighter example, but you'll get the whole concept. So if I get a new job, a new position, and there's a certain dress code that is expected of me in that situation. So let's say a shirt and a tie, and like I have to be well dressed for that position. Maybe I have a conflict with that. Maybe I like loose clothing, and more of a jeans and loose, I don't know, like hippie style or something. Okay, so if I have that in me, my true identity is more of a hippie, loose clothing, and I say, okay, for this position I need a full suit and a tie. I, I might have some conflicts with that, right? But even if I have those restrictive barriers or limits, what I can do, and it's still, ideally I will address the conflicts that I have within myself, but while doing that, I can still nourish a little bit of what inhabits me, of what feeds me. So maybe I show up in a suit, but with the tie, like the tie is funky. Maybe the suit is in a different color, a different material, that enables me to show up a little more like myself. So by respecting those limits, I still nourish a little bit of fun or a little bit of my identity in a way that nourishes me, that enables me to show up a little more as myself, even while respecting those the limiting barriers. So I think you get the idea. So really, it's about understanding what am I in conflict with at the identity level, so I can address it. And at the same time, while I'm addressing those conflicts to release myself, it's also by nourishing those elements of my identity that need to express, that need to show up, that need to be present. So I can do both at the same time. Even by being very limited, I can still show up differently in ways that will support my identity. And that goes for, that's a very specific example. It goes very, very large. At any time that you have the opportunity to take care of yourself, of your identity, self with a capital S, of your identity, and show up in a way that feels more truthful for you in a situation, whether you have limiting beliefs or restrictive barriers. If you show up just a little more as yourself, you're going to feel the difference. Your dignity is going to come back to you. Your self-worth is going to go higher, and then by leaning into that inner state of dignity, you're going to be inspired to do it even more. And maybe at some point, by feeding, by aligning your identity, you're going to feel that the conflict is too heavy, the price is too big that you're paying by showing up a certain way, and that is going to lead you to a different path. Or maybe you're going to address those limits or barriers. The point is that you have some of the conflicts to release, the weights to release, and you also have the alignment of the element, of the identity element, to focus on. And it's in the balance of both that you will find your sweet spot, and that your growth through those experiences, your growth will be, well, I was going to say optimized or maximized, but it's not about maximizing your growth. It's really about understanding that the magic happens when you do a little bit of each of the two paths, when there's a balance between how much focus and energy and resources you put on releasing the weights, dealing with the conflicts, and um, aligning yourself and feeding your self-care. When you find that balance, that sweet spot, you will know that your path, your growth will be at its best. And it starts really small, one step at a time, but you'll see that it's going to gain momentum the more you find that balance between those two paths. I hope all that makes sense. So that so the two questions when you're exploring that dimension: what identity conflicts are you carrying? The beliefs about who you are that are quietly holding you back. That's one element on the releasing side. And then the second question is, what would it mean to give your identity element more love, which is same as more attention, more focus, more self-care, more nourishment? To you would do that to tend to who you actually are, so to feed yourself, in a capital S, to feed your identity, to nourish it so it comes out more naturally, rather than who you think you should be. So instead of playing a role, instead of having offering a performance, you offer your true self, exactly who you are at the present moment. So, sometimes it's a smile, sometimes it's not so much, sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's whatever. Last episode 5, we kind of went through the same process with the emotions dimension, which I was making the point that you can either control your emotions, meaning suppressing them, you can manage them. So choose which emotion shows at which moment, but ultimately we want to release and express and make sure that our emotions are constantly flowing, which also means that when anger comes up, I if I fully respect my emotions, the anger will show. There are ways to manage that anger, but as long as the anger shows up, as long as the anger is expressed, when it shows up, then you're past the management of emotions. You're releasing and you're letting your emotions flow. So same thing for the identity. If I tend to manage or even control my emotions, of course my identity is not going to be 100%. It's not going to feel 100% truthful, because I'm masking it with various by controlling emotions. So if I'm angry but I put on a smile, it's because my identity is dependent of a belief that I have, that if I show anything else than a smile in a certain situation, I'm not going to be accepted. I'm not going to fit in. So I play a performance. I play a role. I offer a performance through my emotions to protect my belonging. To connect with people, to fit in. So I switch my identity through managing or controlling my emotions, which means that I probably have a conflict with that, because I show up differently than I would feel like it. And at the same time, I'm going to kind of dampen my self-care and my nourishment of my identity, because I need to show up a certain way. I need to control it. So on and so on. So the reverse of all that is in episode 4, it was about releasing the emotions. But in episode 5, it's really in this dimension of identity. It's really about nourishing who I truly am in small steps, while also addressing the beliefs that are holding me back. When you do those two, when you explore that dimension in those two paths at the same time, you will see that's where the magic happens. All right, let's wrap this episode up with the question of the month until we meet again in episode 6. Episode 6, we're going to talk about relationships. So the dimension of relationships and the inner state that we lean into is humbleness. So quite similar as humility, but humbleness is about recognizing that I am not better, I'm not more or less than you, and you are not more or less than me. So we show up equally, and then we can build trust and a solid base for the relationship to grow on. So that's next episode. Today, episode 5, the question to carry a little bit into either into the night or for the next few days. What would change in your life if you showed up as yourself fully, without any apology, no performance, no role play, no expectations? This is who I am. Take it or leave it. That's how I show up. What would change in your life if you showed up as yourself just a little more often? Just instead of playing a performance almost 24/7, a role that you put on when you get out the door in the morning, and then you carry that suit or that performance all the way to when you're back in the house in the evening, and then you can relax. What would happen if, instead of starting your performance right when you're out the door, you wait 5 minutes, 10 minutes down the road, and then you wait until you get to work, and then you wait until lunchtime, and so on and so forth, until a point where you don't perform at all during the day. You show up as yourself fully in every single situation. What would change? We're not going to go like from 0 to 100. What would change if you showed up as yourself for 5 minutes? Any time of the day, there's no performance, no expectations. It's truly yourself, however you show up in that moment. What would change in your life? I'll leave you with that question. No answers needed. It's something that you can reflect on, that you can carry for the next few days or a couple of weeks. And if you have any comments or questions about this episode, or specifically about that question, then please share them with me through the comments, or send me a quick email. I'll answer you really quickly. And carry that question with you, that episode, that identity dimension that you can explore either by aligning your with your true self, or by releasing the weights that are holding you back. Ideally, you do a little bit of both, and you find that balance, that sweet spot where the magic happens. So I wish you a really good full moon in Aquarius, day of miracles. I wish you all the best that you can desire, and we will see each other next month, next episode, in episode 6. Like I said, we're talking about relationships. We're going to explore the relationships dimension and the two paths, the alignment, how to align ourselves with humbleness, and how to release some of the weights that are holding us back in really connecting into with others in those relationships. So thank you for your presence, your attention. I will see you soon, and I invite you to, until we meet again, to take good care of yourselves. Namaste, my friend.